Are we on? I think we are. Boy, that was fast today. I'm going to go with it. I think we are live. So, hello, everybody. Lori Swanson here from the CEO and founder of Inspire Tech and the CEO of Inspire Tech, the founder of Career Alchemy Academy, and your host for this session of Career Alchemy live broadcast on LinkedIn and YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all the channels. So I'm excited to see all of you here and welcome you on this wonderful spring day, March 25th, 2026. Beautiful weather here in Chicago. I love talking about the weather. And it's funny because today I'm going to tell a little bit of a story about my grandmother. And we used to call her not every week, but when I was younger, we'd call her fairly frequently. My parents and my dad and I and my sister, and but then as I got older and was doing my own thing, I didn't call her quite as often. But generally, primary topic of conversation was the weather. She and my grandfather lived in Michigan in the Grand Rapids area, and that's really what I want to talk about today. So or that's kind of the inspiration behind the story. So the title of today's conversation is I think I'll percolate on this. And it's like a career lesson that I didn't expect. So when I was younger, we'd go to my grandparents up there, and they lived just outside of Grand Rapids. If you're familiar with the area, they were off of Cannonsburg Road. So I think it was actually maybe Rockford, Michigan, by the Cannonsburg ski area. And they had a lot of property, and we'd go up there and we would hunt for mushrooms, and we'd play in the trout stream, and um, walk among the pine trees and the apple orchard. It was just, idyllic for a young child growing up. And we'd play croquet and did cribbage. I learned cribbage from her and my great grandfather, and we play 500 Rummy. So 500 Rummy is a card game where you deal out cards. You each have a hand, and then the object is to get rid of all your cards and to get as many points as you can by melding or laying down three or more cards of the same number, like three threes, or three or more in the same in a set, like three, four, five of clubs, three, four, five, six, seven of clubs. Like laying these down, and so you're picking up cards off of the pile. Discarding card, you have to pick up one card and discard one card on every turn. You can also, if you pick up the whole discard pile, so if you decide to pick up the discard, you pick up the whole pile, and then you have all these cards, but you get to lay down a bunch of cards, can give you a lot of points until you're out of cards, right? So we would play this card game, and my grandmother would do this thing where she'd pick up, I discard a card to her, she'd pick it up, and she'd kind of look at me with this little smile, and she'd go, "I think I'm going to percolate on this one." And then she'd put it in her hand, and invariably, you know, two or three turns later, I discard another card completely unrelated to the ones that I'd seen her pick up already, the ones I'd already discarded to her. And she'd pick it up and she'd be like, "Oh, I think I'm going to percolate on this one too," which, that smile and just the way she would say it, I think it was all part of her strategy, really, because it completely threw me off my game. Um, and the fact is, I didn't really know what the word percolate was a big word. I didn't really know what it meant, but I got the gist of it eventually, that I realized that she was, you know, thinking about these cards. She was putting them in her hand and seeing how they might be able to eventually build into sets and runs that she could lay down and make points with, right? So I got the gist of what the word percolate meant, but and it was a cool word. That's all I have to say. It was a cool word. So And more often or not, for her, she'd percolate on these cards, and the next thing you know, she's going out. She's laying down all her cards, and that's all she wrote, and adding up all her points, and here we go, and we're redealing and starting over. So the other day, I'm in the car, driving wherever I'm driving, and listening to the radio per usual, and there's a conversation and they're talking about the percolation theory. And I thought, well, I've never heard of the percolation theory. Percolate, love that word, made me immediately think about my grandmother who's been, she's passed away now. She passed away. She was 96 when she passed away. So we had her a very, very long time. She was just amazing woman, and love thinking about her and talking about her and having a place where I can talk about her. But so when you hear something like that, you know how it is, and it reminds you of someone you love, that's no longer with you, or even someone who is. It's just wonderful, to have memory. And so I'm thinking about her when they're talking about this percolation theory, and listening to them explain what it is. So it's essentially the percolation theory is this idea about how things, spread through a system. So how individual pieces build and connect through a system, not necessarily, you know, making a lot of sense at first until they reach a threshold. And then once they reach a threshold, it's as if nothing really is happening until they reach that threshold, and then it makes sense. So, and I was like, that's exactly what my grandmother was doing with the cards. I'd lay down a seven of clubs, she'd percolate on it. She might have in her hand an eight of clubs, but she didn't have a run at that point. But she was thinking about the possibility of something building and connecting from there. And then a little while later, she picks up the nine of hearts. She doesn't have, you know, um, a run or a set at that point, but she's percolating on it. She's seeing about the connection of it. She keeps picking up things and allowing the possibility of them. And at some point, she picks up the 10 of clubs. So now she has the eight of clubs and the nine of clubs that she picked up from my discard, and the 10 of clubs that she picked up from the pile. And boom, a connection is made. She lays down this run, and, she's getting the points, right? And so the percolation theory is exactly like that. And it's exactly how a job search or even your career, um, you know, is built. It's how that works. So let me break that down a little bit further for you. So it's not that you're stuck, it's that you're percolating. So in your career, you're constantly picking things up, a new idea, a new skill, a new connection, right? Um, a uh, maybe a new role, and sometimes that skill or that role or even that person you met at a networking event, you're not sure if it exactly makes sense right now. You're offered an opportunity to speak at a conference or go to a conference even, and you're like, well, okay, I'm given the opportunity. I don't really know, exactly how valuable this, if it's going to be all that valuable for me, but I'm given the opportunity. I'll say yes to it. I'll pick that card up, right? And I'm not even sure if I'll, ever get an opportunity to really use that skill or make use of that connection. But I picked up the card. So it can feel random. It can feel disconnected. Like I said, it can feel unclear in the moment, but it's not. You are often building something for the future that is, it just hasn't hit the threshold yet. It just hasn't hit the percolation threshold. So there's three ways that you can percolate more intentionally. Percolate on purpose is the way I like to think about it. So the first way is that, just pick things up like my grandmother did. Just picks things up even if you're not fully sure about it. So my grandmother wasn't waiting for the perfect card. So certainly if she had the eight and the nine of clubs and I discard the 10, yeah, she's going to pick it up and she's going to lay down. But if she had the eight, she wasn't like, well, I don't have the nine of clubs, so I'm not going to pick up, you know, I, I don't have the 10 of clubs, so I'm not going to pick up the nine of clubs that Lori just threw me, right? She's like, no, I'll percolate on it. What does it hurt me? I'll percolate on it. I'll pick it up. So, you know, that card is worth percolating on. So she would feel sort of like like a thought would come in her head and like, that's a possibility. So if you get that kind of a nudge of, you know, there's this Coursera course that pops up on your screen and you're like, that's kind of interesting. It makes no sense right now from where I'm at with my career, but I'm interested in it. Consider that a percolation point, something to percolate on. And then just explore the new skill, take the course, attend the conference, go to the networking event. Don't think about it too much. That's one of the ways. Just pick it up, even if you're not sure, even if it doesn't make complete sense. The second thing is let multiple things exist at once. So my grandmother might pick up that seven of clubs, and then she might pick up the nine of hearts, making no sense to me and probably no sense to her fully, because now she's, in one way, she said no to the possibility of the card she couldn't see on the deck by taking the card she could see that had some connection in her hand, but not a full meld, right? Not a full run or a set, but some possibility. So, and the nine of hearts is nowhere ever going to make sense with the seven of clubs, but she's letting them both exist at the same time and kind of like, trusting that at some point these things are going to build into something separately yet also part of your career, that they both will can exist at the same time and also be additive to your career. So you're not trying to and I think the other important thing around this is that it isn't a forcing situation, right? So it doesn't make complete sense, but you're not trying to force it to make sense either. You're just connecting ahead of time or trusting that it could connect in the future. So explore more than one path, right? Hold more than one idea at the same time. Let things develop without rushing them. Or rushing to figure them out. The connection happens when there's things to connect. So it's just sort of like, I'll pick up this card, I'll pick up this skill, even though it's interesting, or and I'll pick up this skill that seems totally unrelated, and then watch what happens. Let the things unfold. You might apply to a job where, weirdly, but no surprise, both those skills are listed on there as maybe not requirements, but nice to haves, right? And you're like, well, look at me. I have certifications in both of those, and they're completely unconnected except for this job description, right? So pick the things up that seem disconnected, but interesting, and then watch those connections unfold. And then the third one is that I think is also, kind of interesting in percolating on purpose, is giving time for the hot mess. It sort of builds, but giving time for the hot mess to come together. So I am guessing that if I were to look at my grandmother's hand sort of mid game, that it would, to me and probably to her, look like a complete hot mess. Lots of things not going together. you know, uh, she's percolating, and I'm not even, I'm like, why is she percolating on half of this stuff? I would be questioning a lot of things. The thing about her was she won, believe me, she won most of the time. And not because she was older and wiser, but and she was older and wiser. But even as I became more like, I mean, it's one thing to be an 8-year-old playing somebody, but it's another thing to be like a 28-year-old playing your grandmother, and no excuses anymore, right? She still won a higher percentage of the games. And I think a lot of it had to do with she was comfortable with the uncomfortable. She was comfortable with the hot mess. She just sort of let it percolate and let those, and then she'd discard cards and pick up cards, and things would just start to come out of this, messy situation and turn into something that became clear and unmessy. She's picking up, she's discarding, she uses some of the stuff, and she doesn't use some of the stuff, but she doesn't worry about the stuff she doesn't use. It's okay. It's okay. I'll just get rid of it. I won't use it. And so she was just comfortable in the hot, messy period of the building of, she's, that. And percolating can be an uncomfortable time because nothing is quite happening yet. It's the, it's that, it's that gestation period before, before the birthing time. So how do you know when you've hit the threshold? Um, it may seem obvious, but maybe it's like, how do you know you're right before the threshold? So because there's um, that willingness to keep going because all of a sudden you're feeling some shifts, right? Your hand is starting to come together. Some of this randomness is starting to not look so random. You're starting to see more job descriptions that have the skills that you've been acquiring becoming, desirable. And some of these connections that you made 2 years ago, you're reaching out to them and they're happily getting on calls with you and talking to you about opportunities in their company. Promotions are coming through. You're just, conversations are leading to other conversations, and opportunities are coming to you through people, not just job postings, but also through these connections. Like I said, through people. Some ideas are coming from unique directions, and doors are opening in places that you're like, I never would have thought that was where that would come from. Things feel less forced. There's more ease. That's how you know that you're approaching this threshold, entering the threshold time. You know, there's more momentum, there's less guessing. So the percolation period of where you were like, maybe this, maybe that, you've now that has now borne fruit. And speaking of bearing fruit, um, so two things I want to talk about. First is um, there is, so now you've percolated and you've moved, you can feel the shift coming and the doors opening and the opportunities happening and things starting to make sense out of this percolation period where things were not fully connecting in your brain, but you just kind of kept, being comfortable in the hot mess, and you kind of, you were picking things up, you weren't afraid to pick some things up. And what was the other one? You weren't afraid to pick things up. You were, letting the hot mess come together, and you were letting a couple different things exist at the same time that weren't necessarily making sense. So all of that was happening during the percolation period. And then you, and then the momentum, the shift is happening, and you're like, oh, I'm kind of getting this now. I'm feeling this momentum happening, and I'm getting evidence back that things are starting to click. And this is what my grandmother never missed. She would be percolating on things, right? Picking up, discarding, but then she wouldn't, like, let's say she had the 7, 8, and 9 of clubs and the 9 or the 8 and 9 of clubs, and the 9 of hearts and the 10 of hearts, and she'd get the 10 of clubs, and it could go with the 10 of hearts, but it could also make which is more points. The tens are more points than um, the eight, the 8, 9, and 10 of clubs. So you could put down the 8, 9, and 10 of clubs, and that would be worth um, 20 points. But if you put down the 10 of hearts, the 10 of diamonds, and the 10 of clubs, that's worth 30 points. So you could get more points if you wait for the 10 of diamonds to show up. But my grandmother didn't wait for that. She is just like, I've got this now. I'm putting it down, even though it's technically worth less points in the end. So she would percolate, she would then get the connection, and she would act. She saw the connections and she'd make her moves, right? She didn't overthink it. She didn't think, you know, holding on. She didn't like hold on her cards too long in case something better would come along. Like she just didn't do that. She just would play. Like I would sometimes do that. I always loved and if you've played with players like this, like in other games too, like Rummy Cube, I sometimes do this too. I like to hold the cards and then go lay them all out at once and be like, I'm out. Canasta, I'm out. And but you can get really stung with that, right? And so she just didn't play like that. And again, she was the winner. The odds were generally in her favor. Like it's better to play the way she played than the way I play. But so she'd percolate and then she'd act. She'd percolate, then she'd act. And in coaching, I do see this where people will be percolating on things. And then there's a job description. I literally just had a conversation with one of my clients about this within the last 10 days. She's been building her resume, getting some certifications, doing some things, so that's all part of this percolation period, kind of preparing for what's next in her career. And this job description comes across, and we're in conversation, and just on an aside, like I didn't even know about this job. And she goes, oh yeah, there was this one job, but I didn't apply. And I'm like, well, tell me a little more about that. What was it? Why didn't you apply? She goes, well, there was this bullet point and it said something, and it was like, I don't know about that. And I am like, pick that card up. Let's percolate on it. Apply. You can talk about that bullet point when you get in a conversation with someone. Don't not percolate. Don't not take action on something, right? And and I said, and besides the fact that job descriptions often, they have a job opening, they'll just pull a job description from a year ago, put it up there. It's basically the same job. They haven't gone tooth and nail through every single point on the job description. That might even not be relevant anymore. Don't let that be the reason you don't pick up the card, right? And so that happens. And so we percolate, we pick up cards, and then we take action. We lay it down. We apply to the job, right? So don't think that something better might be coming along, or don't let one little, like, well, that bullet point on that job description, yeah, I don't want to take the time to do that. I'm like, no, take the time, just percolate on it. So when things start to click, all of that to say, when things start to click, say yes before you feel completely ready, even if it isn't 100%. Even if it's not even 80%, just percolate. Put your hat in the ring. Act on what's right in front of you without overthinking, and then let yourself connect to the opportunities. Let yourself be in the game, building the hand, percolating and picking up, melding, laying things down, and then, going out like, boom, I win. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. The percolation theory, percolating on purpose, reaching a threshold that's been built from these, percolation points that you've been building, like these connections you've been making, that then start to come together, and like, the other thing about percolating is like coffee pots, like those they used to call those, didn't they call those, like, I think this is my grandmother's time too, was like the coffee percolating, like coffee pots are percolating, right? It's like the water starts to percolate and bubble, and that's what's happening. All of a sudden the water has reached this threshold and everything starts bubbling, and it's the perfect time. And that's what's going to happen for you if you get in the game, start like just being like, well, that seems interesting. I'm going to try that. I'm going to percolate on that. I'm going to go to that networking event. I'm going to, ask my boss for about that possible opportunity. I'm going to, suggest this idea. Like, just do it and then see what happens, see what connections, watch the threshold be hit, that the momentum then is occurring, and then, you know, enjoy the ride, because that's the good stuff. So that's it for today. I've really always enjoyed coming out here and talking to you all, and love to connect with you out on, um, send me a DM, follow this QR code, and connect with me. Join Career Alchemy Academy, or get on a call with me. We could talk through what's going on for you and if Career Alchemy Academy will make sense, which I think it makes sense for any woman who's at a crossroads, considering what's next, wants support, wants community. We got you. So that's it. And have a great week. I'll see you next week. I think we might be at a different time, but if you get my newsletter, you will see the adjustment in time, or look for the notice out on LinkedIn, and or watch the recording. You can always find me. Talk to you soon. Bye.